Welcome back. Late last week, Congress passed a funding measure that will keep the government open for another 45 days, as aid to Israel and Ukraine are still being held up, and conservatives in the House are rejecting efforts to increase border security. This week, I spoke to South Florida Congressman Jared Moskowitz, and I started with a simple question. Is Congress doing anything right now?
No, nothing's getting done, Jim. This is the least productive Congress in 30 years. It's by the numbers, so math. Right. I mean, we've passed 30 bills. The pace for an average Congress is about 300. So we're way behind that pace. Obviously, this has been just a dysfunctional Congress. It's been completely chaotic. My colleagues across the aisle, when they find time to fight with the Democrats, it's far and few between because they're fighting with themselves. And meanwhile, our allies, Ukraine and Israel, are still waiting for us to help them in a funding bill that we've not been able to get done. What are our allies thinking around the world? What are our enemies looking at and figuring out how they're going to take advantage? So this Congress has created such a mess for the American people.
There seemed that there were some negotiations in the Senate to try to, give the Democrats giving on some issues with regard to immigration, particularly on policy reforms, not just additional funding. But it seems to not have a lot of support among Republicans in the House. Where is immigration standing right now?
On the border and on immigration, there is bipartisan agreement that there is an issue at the border, major issues at the border, and that we can solve it. If you listen to John Thune and Lindsey Graham, conservative members of the Senate, they're working on the most conservative border policy to come out of the Senate in a generation. And I'm willing to vote for it. I'm willing to work with them in the Senate and my colleagues in the House to do something at the border, because this has been decades in the making, failure after failure, administration after administration, Congress after Congress, not willing to address it.
For a very long time, Democrats refused to even acknowledge that there was a crisis on the border. The fact that Democrats are now talking about the border as a crisis, in part, I think is reflecting the reality of what voters are now saying is their most important issue, which includes the economy and immigration. Were Democrats late to recognize the problems on the border?
Well, look, I just got here, so I've only been here a year. And I've been talking about the border since I got here. As far as Democrats, no. Barack Obama deported more people in each of his two terms than President Trump deported in his term. President Obama deported, like 1 million more people in a 4-year term than President Trump did. So Democrats have been talking about this and dealing with the border. The issue is that it's become politicized, Jim, just like a lot of other issues up here, which is no one wants to solve problems when the other person is in charge, because they don't want to give the other team a win. And that's kind of what's happening in the House now. Going back to your previous question, what's happening in the House now is I have colleagues who have been ginning up the border issue all year, talking about a crisis, talking about fentanyl, which is a real issue, right? We have kids dying from fentanyl in this country. My predecessor, Ted Deutsch's nephew, died from an accidental fentanyl overdose. And now many of my Republican House colleagues are coming out and admitting they don't want to do anything on the border. They'll vacate the chair. They'll vacate the new speaker if he tries to solve the border, because they don't want to give Joe Biden a win. They don't want to do it before the election. They want to do it. They want to listen to Donald Trump, who wants the border to get worse so he can use it as an election issue rather than solve the problem.